Herodotus lived during the 5th century before the Common Era in ancient Greece. He wrote a narrative summarizing history as it was then known and describing many of the events of his own lifetime. Although direct discussion on his biases and epistemology is saved for the conclusion of the series, on this video you may learn details about a portion of his work. The 5th book, called Terpsichore, Democracies United. After his failed expedition in Scythia, Darius left Europe and his commander Megabazos started subduing the still free people of the Aegean Sea, the area between Europe and Asia Minor. Curiously, the historian describes how instead of a battle against the Perinthians, the two sides agreed to 3 Iliad-style combats, meaning 3 individual fights in the area between the two armies. What I found curious is that 2 of the combats were meant to be carried out by animals, a pair of horses and dogs, one of each from each side. I find this as another proof, akin to the fact that up to not so long ago animals used to be tried in court, that, well, primitive man was more aware that there is not that much difference between man and other animals. Eventually, Megabazos marched into Thrace. This may be confusing as the historian previously stated that Darius had already conquered the Thracians. Yet, it might be, I deduce, that by Thracians Herodotus now means all the native Western Europeans. Consider how he says that besides the Indians these people are the most numerous in the world, such that
if it should come to be ruled over by one man, or to agree together in one, it would be irresistible in fight and the strongest by far of all nations.
A European tribe that practiced polygamy is mentioned. In this tribe, allegedly, whenever a husband died, the surviving wives competed for the honor of being sacrificed to accompany the deceased in the afterlife. This may seem utterly incredible, however, another ancient historian, Diodorus Siculus, describes the same behavior among a certain Indian tribe that Alexander the Great encounters. Diodorus' account on this point is very remarkable. Of course, you may also learn about his writings on this channel. Then enters a story fit for a popular movie wherein a Macedonian prince takes rightful revenge on some abusive Persian diplomats. The latter asked for Macedonian women to service them sexually. The Macedonian king felt obliged to abide. Yet, the son of the king, named Alexander, did not stand by the abuse and disguised some men as women and had them kill the Persian ambassadors. The prior leads to the claim that the Macedonians are not barbarians but Greeks. The historian says that he will prove it in the next book, but does mention the simple fact that they were accorded the right to participate in the Olympics. Skipping some details, Otanes is given command of the Ionian cities. He conquered the Byzantines and Caledonia. The historian then describes how the Ionians on the western coast of Asia Minor deposed their respective tyrants. I must admit that I will be skipping much, perhaps because I find it rather inconsequential and perhaps because this portion of the account is rather difficult to follow. It should suffice to know about a certain self-interested scoundrel that first aims to profit by the Persians and then instigates the rebellion against them. This man goes to Sparta to requisition aid against the ensuing Persian retribution. The prior allows the historian to describe how Cleomenes attained the throne of Sparta. Don't confuse him with the Cleomenes described in Plutarch's biographies, that one comes later. Either way, the historian describes this Cleomenes negatively as his father had accidentally ended up with 2 sons, each from a different woman. What is negative is that his counterpart, the other child, seemed to have been more competent or intelligent. Yet, the dumb one gains the crown because he was slightly the elder. As to why his father had ended up with children by different women, it turns out that his wife could not bear children, and the Ephors, fearful that the line of Heracles would be lost, asked him to get a technical second wife. Yet, by the time this new woman gave birth, so did the first that previously had not. It is a curious story. Returning to the scoundrel and the newly freed Ionians, the scoundrel is rejected by the Spartans, and thus he goes to Athens. This segues into how Athens came to be the democracy that it was at that point in time. You will remember from the first book that Pisistratus has taken control of Athens. So, a certain noble family that disliked the sons of the tyrant bribed the oracle of Delphi into telling the Spartans that they must free Athens. Therefore, Cleomenes is sent to Athens at the head of an army. The Athenian people took the opportunity to rebel, and together with the Spartan force, they overthrew the tyrant and his family. They did not kill the king, rather they traded his captured sons in exchange for him peacefully leaving. Of course, getting rid of the tyrants is one thing, but establishing a democracy is a whole extra venture. Herodotus explains that there were two ruling orators or politicians, Isagoras and Cleisthenes. Isagoras was popular among the wealthy, while Cleisthenes introduced a platform very popular with the common people. He suggested dividing everyone into 10, as opposed to 4 tribes. These, I have always opined, are akin to voting districts, though they are not geographic or economic. They were determined by random selection, and therefore they were impartial and egalitarian. Such is the value of random selection, the only true impartiality and fairness. In response, Isagoras called on Cleomenes to help him. The Spartan king demanded that the Athenians expel Cleisthenes and marched with a small, personal force into Athens. Cleisthenes was forced to flee the city, and Cleomenes installed the rule of 300 unelected despots. Yet, before he left, the Athenians rose up in revolt and besieged him and these oligarchs. In the end, the Spartans were allowed to leave under a truce, Cleisthenes returned, and democracy was further established. The Athenians sent messengers to Persia seeking alliance for what seemed a certain war against Sparta. In the meanwhile, Cleomenes prepared a large force of all the Peloponnesians with the intent of placing Isagoras as tyrant in Athens. Yet, when this army reached the front lines, the Corinthians refused to fight on behalf of tyrannizing other Greeks. Soon enough, Democracies, the other Spartan king, also refused to partake in the endeavor and thus split the army in two. As a result, Cleomenes had to abandon his plans. So as to avoid such divisions in the future, a law was passed in Sparta that whenever an army marched outside the city, it could only take one king with it. On these incidents, we may see the beginnings of the political divide that will bring about the Great Pan-Hellenic War. Know that Thucydides and Xenophon, who are also described and analyzed on this channel, discuss it in detail. The Athenians, meanwhile, were not satisfied with merely fending off the Spartans. Enlivened by their new freedom, they sought revenge from some who had aimed to help Cleomenes. In particular, they invaded the Chalcidians and the Boeotians. Herodotus praises democracy as he describes how and why the Athenians rose so staggeringly fast in power and mastery over their neighbors.
Equality is an excellent thing, since the Athenians, while they were ruled by despots, were not better in war than any of those who dwelt about them, whereas after they had got rid of despots, they became far the first. This proves that when they were kept down, they were willfully slack, because they were working for a master, whereas when they had been set free, each one was eager to achieve something for himself.
The historian describes a war against the Thebans. The Spartans once again grow interested as they see Athens growing to match them in power. Once again, Cleomenes attempts to unite the Peloponnesians against Athens, but once again the Corinthians disagreed. A certain Sophocles is quoted as saying,
"Surely now the heaven shall be below the earth, and the earth raised up on high above the heaven, and men shall have their dwelling in the sea, and fishes shall have that habitation which men had before. Seeing that ye, Lacedaemonians, are doing away with free government and are preparing to bring back despotism again into our cities."
Herodotus takes the opportunity to clarify and explain the history of despotism the Corinthians had suffered. The latter involves yet another tale fit for a movie. To make a long story short, Corinth was a hereditary oligarchy, meaning the rulers were not even elected, instead they openly inherited. Either way, a prophecy is made that the next child will become a horrible ruler, and so plans are made to kill the child. Yet, the assassins fail, due to the pity they feel for the baby. So, the boy grows but turns out to rule in an acceptable way. Yet, as Machiavelli warns, the son that follows him grows to be tyrannical. Of course, on this channel you may also learn about Machiavelli's writings. Famously, the youth learns how to be a tyrant from another tyrant. Herein is a now famous analogy.
The best way to keep order and rule is to cut down all the wheat stalks that are too tall.
It is similar to Mao Zedong's analogy concerning nails that must be hammered down. Needless to mention, this tyrant does horrible things, such as set fire to a bunch of women, both noble and common. The historian does not describe how Corinth gained its freedom or what kind of government it then had. He does quote the same previous speaker as saying,
"Such a thing, ye must know, Lacedaemonians, is despotism, and such are its deeds. Know that the Corinthians at least do not give their consent to that which ye do."
I imagine, of course, that at that moment Corinth must have been what we would now call a representative democracy, one as Sparta, though without egalitarian economics. Perhaps they even had a bit of real democracy. In the end, the Peloponnesians refuse to comply with the Spartan suggestion and war with Athens is avoided, that is, until after the Persian invasion, of course. Herodotus now returns to the doings of the scoundrel. He speaks before the Athenian people at the Hill of the Pnyx and convinces them that they should aid the Ionians gain freedom from the Persians. He did so by telling them that the Persians were poorly trained and did not use good weapons. That part must have been partially true. The Persians not only had a barbarian military structure with unelected generals, but most of the soldiers would have been unwilling draftees without training and with poor weapons, if any armor at all. I mention the prior as the historian says,
"For it would seem that it is easier to deceive many than one, seeing that, though he did not prove able to deceive Cleomenes the Lacedaemonian by himself, yet he did this to 30,000 Athenians."
This has become, throughout history, a classic criticism of democracy. I would like to say,
persuading others is not, and has never been, a matter of facts. Persuading others is a matter of rhetoric, otherwise known as manipulation.
or how about,
The efficacy of a speech depends less on the veracity and logic of the message than on the education and emotion of the audience.
either way, Herodotus says, speaking of the Athenians' decision,
These ships proved to be the beginning of evils for the Hellenes and the barbarians.
of course, the Athenians sent merely 20 ships to the western coast of Asia Minor. The scoundrel deceived them only in the sense that he did not truly intend to free the Ionians, but rather to make himself a tyrant. The military expedition involved the accidental burning of a temple of a certain Persian goddess named Hybib. The Persians took this as justification for later burning every Greek temple that fell in their hands. Woe to humanity. Speaking of Darius, let me quote,
He charged one of his attendants that when dinner was set before the king, he should say always 3 times, "Master, remember the Athenians."
There were many battles, some in which the Greeks performed outstandingly, often utterly extinguishing the Persian forces. Yet, obviously, through persistence and fresh troops, the Persians defeated the rebellions. In the end, the scoundrel is forced to flee to Thrace, where he is killed by barbarians. Although the 5th book ends here, the 6th book describes further details about these failed rebellions. Aside from the rebellions, Herodotus' next book mocks the Spartans and celebrates the eternal renowned Athenian triumph at the Battle of Marathon. Now, to ignite your curiosity, to motivate you to watch the last video of the series, I gift you a teaser sample of one of the many aphorisms I crafted as I read this author.
It is not that crowds are easier to deceive than individuals. Rather, since most individuals are foolish, then all crowds are gullible.
If you enjoy or gain from my aphorisms, know that I have thousands. I will be writing books with short thematic essays composed out of aphorisms. These essays are profound and intriguing yet easy to read. For very cheap copies, look up Protagoras Pause in the Amazon website. I repeat, Protagoras Pause, that's my name.